One of your most popular video series on your channel is about an inbred family, right?
Yeah, it's good.
Where did they live?
As one of the 5 families that dominate organized crime in the New York region, the Bonanno crime family has a history longer than my arm, so let's try and keep it concise. This family was seen as the most brutal of the 5 families during the 20th century, so don't go making all buddy-buddy. Their origins can be traced back to the town of Castellammare del Golfo, located in the province of Trapani, Sicily. Their boss, by the way, was Giuseppe Pepe Bonanno, and his older brother and advisor, Stefano. I hope I didn't butcher my Italian. The clan's strongest ally was the leader of the Magaddino clan, Stefano Magaddino, the brother of Joseph's maternal grandmother. During the 1900s, the 2 clans feuded with Felice Buccellato, the boss of the Buccellato clan. So in 1902, Stefano arrived in New York and became a powerful member of the Castellammare clan. After the deaths of Stefano and Giuseppe, their younger brother Salvatore took revenge by killing members of the Buccellatos. So by 1903, Salvatore married Catherine Bonventre, and on January 18th of 1905, she gave birth to Joseph. 3 years later, Salvatore moved his family to New York City and began establishing dominance and control in the Castellammare community of Williamsburg, Brooklyn. So while operating in Brooklyn, the Castellammare leaders were able to secure the criminal organization's future. As of 2017, the family had 110 established members and over 500 associates. They were responsible for numerous planned killings and accidental deaths over the years, to the point where I spent like a half an hour today trying to count them all. I kept getting lost in my count. There was too many. Genghis Khan rose from obscurity in a small corner of the Mongolian steppe to form the largest land empire in history. For the Mongols, the family was the central pillar of society. Genghis's sons and then grandsons extended the empire to reach from the western shores of the Black Sea to the Pacific. So these Mongols, often outnumbered, conquered through their mastery of tactics and psychological warfare. So if a city or an entire people surrendered, they would treat them well. They'd allow them to enjoy the fruits of a secure world. If they resisted, well, you and your city are gonna feel the full fury of the enraged invaders. Despite all the violence that took place as the Mongols extended their rule, once they were in power, the lands were safe, they were well controlled. In many cases, this represented a distinct improvement from previous conditions. Subjects had considerable personal liberty, such as the freedom to follow their own religion, but at what cost? Because this comes with a price. Some experts calculate that 11% of the world's population died because of the Mongol expansion. That's a lot of people. The Ptolemies of ancient Egypt ruled between 305 to 30 BC and are responsible for such a long list of mysterious deaths that they had to be listed today. So they viewed family members as a fight to the death, where you constantly try to eliminate your closest relatives before they did it to you. So let's say P IV killed his mother, who had previously killed her husband because he was having an affair with her mother. So then he married his sister Arsinoe III, who was immediately killed after her husband/brother's death. Her son, P V, had his mother's killers ripped to pieces by an angry group of people. P VII was either killed by his uncle or his father. We're not super sure on that one. P VIII married Cleopatra II, but began an affair with her daughter, Cleopatra III. He had his son cut into pieces and then sent them to his mother. Ugh. So P IX tried to kill his mother, Cleopatra III, then married the first one, and then another sister, both called Cleopatra. P X married the daughter of P IX, Berenice III, and P XI also married Berenice III, who was either his sister or his mother or both. And after 19 days of marriage, he had her killed, and he was promptly torn to pieces by an enraged Greek mob. And that's just the highlights, folks. Time for another one of the New York 5 families, the Genovese crime family. Also referred to as the West Side, they were founded by Charles Lucky Luciano in 1931 until being renamed after boss Vito Genovese in 1957. Originally in control of the waterfront on the west side of Manhattan, as well as the docks and the Fulton Fish Market on the East River waterfront, this family was run for many years by Vincent the Chin Gigante, who feigned insanity by shuffling unshaven through New York's Greenwich Village by wearing a tattered bathrobe and muttering to himself incoherently to avoid persecution. If it works. It works. So this family is the oldest and the largest of the 5 families. Finding new ways to make money in the 21st century, they took advantage of lax due diligence by banks during the housing bubble with a wave of mortgage frauds. They appear to be the most organized and powerful family in the US, with sources believing that Liborio Barney Balomo is the current boss. Maybe. Unique in today's mafia climate, the family has benefited greatly from members following Omerta, which is a code of conduct emphasizing secrecy and non-cooperation with law enforcement and the justice system. So while many mobsters from across the country have testified against their crime families since like the 1980s, this family has only had 11 members and associates turned in history, which is not a lot. Nay. They're known for crimes of, oh boy, let's see, racketeering, killing, labor union infiltration, extortion, illegal gambling, substances, loan sharking, bookmaking, truck hijacking, fraud. I could keep going, but we only have so much time. If you want to talk about ghosts, then who are you going to call? Well, you should actually probably call Dan Aykroyd. His fascination with the paranormal started because his great-grandfather was a spiritualist who held seances. Turns out there's a whole book called History of Ghosts written by Dan's dad, and it's about mediumship and his interest in it. He was the reviewer of all these psychic acts who came through town. He was associated with the Lily Dale community in New York, where you can go and get a reading from a registered psychic, and that got passed on throughout the family. They wanted to know what was going on. They wanted to know how levitation was possible, how ectoplasm is possible. Well, that all checks. The story of Mark and his family's eerie encounter with a cursed Ouija board infested home in Australia started off subtle, like their dog's reluctance to enter the house, originally dismissed as a mere adjustment to the new environment. But then, as things do, they escalated. Let's see, there was the mysterious flooding in the laundry room, shattered light bulbs, an overwhelming sense of unease in certain areas of the house that signaled something far more sinister. Disembodied laughter, shuffling feet, and phantom voices only intensified their torment. As the supernatural disturbances grew unbearable, the family decided to take action. The mom's brave confrontation with the paranormal, reading Bible verses aloud, was met with the spirit's fury, resulting in potential poltergeist activity. The peak of this terrifying tale came when the youngest member of the family miraculously survived a fall from an open window. This event was the final straw, prompting them to flee the cursed house without looking back. Burari, a nondescript neighborhood in the Indian capital of Delhi, attained notoriety after 11 members of the Chandawat family were found dead inside their home, amid whispers of occult practices. So police say 10 of them were dangling from the ceiling, and their hands were tied behind their backs, and their eyes and mouths were covered with cloth. And police have zeroed in on one of the men in the family, one Lalit Chandawat. So documents and phones that were recovered from the house hinted at Lalit's interest in spirits and ghosts. Police believe he frequently visited crematoriums, obsessively watched paranormal content, and notes found in one of the diaries hint at a strong belief that supernatural forces would intervene and save the family. And apparently it motivated the family to do what they did. The notes in the diaries laid out exactly how the family needed to carry out this act before they were to have been saved. And it looks like a lot of these instructions were carried out. These notes also refer to Thursday or Sunday as the chosen days, and police believe the deaths occurred between late Saturday night and early Sunday morning. The diaries listed out that the family needed to cover their eyes and mouths with a cloth during the ritual, and that's where we're going to end that because I'm not telling you how to do this. One night, Lorraine Warren received a voicemail from a Mrs. Sandy Foster, who nervously described a very distressing situation and begged the Warrens to return her call. Although it was 12:40 in the morning, Lorraine immediately tried to call her back, and while the phone rang, the connection wouldn't connect. The next day, Ed and Lorraine made the decision to go pay the Fosters a visit, just to be safe. Well, Mrs. Foster brought up that her daughter Meg had been really interested in the occult, and had actually purchased a book on conjuring as a gift for her daughter. And based off the description of it, I think it was a copy of the Ars Goetia. The family described a plethora of instances of demonic activity, and Lorraine herself experienced an inhuman presence throughout the home. So Ed told the family he and Lorraine could handle everything, but hey, maybe just get out of the house for a little bit while we do what we gotta do. So they got to work the moment the Fosters left. They were determined to discover the true nature of the spirit's presence in order to dispel it. After a lot of work, they managed to do so, but not without a struggle. Bob Smith's fascination with this seemingly innocent painting turned into a haunting mystery when a kitchen fire devastated his grandmother's house, leaving only the painting unscathed. The eerie connection deepened when Bob later learned that the very same painting had caused similar tragedies in other households. Giovanni Bragalin's series of paintings, of which The Crying Boy was a part of, of, became notorious. In 1985, the Sun newspaper in the UK published a shocking account of Maryanne Hall, whose home was consumed by fire with only the cursed painting surviving unharmed. And what's truly unsettling is the firefighter's claim that he had witnessed multiple house fires where everything was reduced to ashes except for copies of The Crying Boy. The widespread reports of similar incidents fueled the belief in the painting's curse, leading to a wave of fear and destruction. Ultimately, the Sun's bonfire of these paintings marked the end of their popularity, but a few copies still linger, carrying with them the ominous aura of the inexplicable. A doll originally belonging to Robert Eugene Otto, an artist, was described as eccentric once upon a time. Neighbors of Robert used to hear him having a conversation with the doll, and this continued into his adult years. He brought the doll everywhere. He talked about it in the first person, as if it wasn't a doll, as if Robert was his own being. Well, the doll remained stored in the Otto family home until Robert the human passed away in 1974. After his death, a couple bought the house, and their daughter found the doll in the attic, and she claimed that the doll was trying to kill her. So the family got rid of it. The doll is now on display in a museum in Key West, and don't worry, the doll still curses people. His last caretaker before the museum experienced him disappear and reappear as he pleased. They heard footsteps, they heard giggling in the attic. Some folks even claim that Robert's expression changes when anybody badmouths Otto in his presence. He's also been responsible for a couple of car crashes, some divorces, broken bones, so go near him at your own risk. Famed AEW wrestler Malachi Black has a fascination with the occult because he grew up in a household that had some very disturbing and interesting things. So he knows how to create these cult-like characters on TV because, well, he grew up with it. He understands it. It was something that had a great influence on him because his grandfather would tell him incredible stories about, and well, once again, folks, we're gonna get bizarre here. He would tell him stories about things that he witnessed with black magic in Malaysia. There was a type of voodoo that they used that was called guna guna, and the grandfather got involved with that. He saw it happening around the camps. Things were strung up and soldiers were sick and they couldn't find what was going on. And the villagers were like, oh, he's being subjected to this voodoo, which kind of sparked Malachi's interest. When he was growing up, he was exposed to a lot of perhaps strange things, but it really shaped his mind into questioning everything and looking at the world very differently than a lot of folks. And it made for a very interesting upbringing. He said there was a lot of difficult moments and a lot of very, very difficult growing up, very disconnected moments. It was definitely not your run-of-the-mill upbringing, but it was interesting.
Number 10, Elizabeth Bathory. Elizabeth Bathory, commonly referred to as the Blood Countess, occupies a pretty creepy place in history as a Hungarian noblewoman with a notorious reputation. She is believed to be one of the most prolific female serial killers in history, earning her eerie nickname from the gruesome practice of bathing in the red of her victims. This ritual was apparently rooted in her belief that it could preserve her youthfulness, and it sounds like some pretty extreme anti-aging to me. Operating during the late 16th and early 17th centuries within the walls of her castle, now located in modern-day Slovakia, Bathory subjected an estimated 650 girls to unimaginable horrors. Her reign of terror reached its thankful end on December 30th, 1610, when Elizabeth, along with 4 accomplices, faced arrest following an investigation into the disturbing rumors surrounding her actions. Despite the severity of the accusations, though, a lack of concrete evidence prevented the claims from being substantiated. However, the absence of solid proof did not grant her leniency, and she was confined to her castle until her eventual passing. Her evil deeds and the whole blood-soaked castle deal make her a heavyweight in the true crime scene. It's a legitimate horror story with more questions than answers. Would probably make a great horror film, though. And in at number 9 today is Ma Barker. Ma Barker, a notorious figure in US criminal history, served as the leader of the feared Barker gang, which her sons were also a part of. Gaining the title of the FBI's public enemy #1, Barker orchestrated a series of robberies, murders, and kidnappings across the American Midwest in the early 1930s. Her life came to a pretty explosive end in 1935 during a prolonged standoff in her Florida hideout, setting a record as the longest standoff in FBI history. J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI's first director, once described her as the most vicious, dangerous, and resourceful criminal brain of the last decade. Hoover's description added to Ma Barker's mysterious reputation, solidifying her reputation as one of the most evil women of all time. Number 8, Belle Gunnis. Belle Gunnis holds the disturbing title of one of America's worst female serial killers. Even before considering her terrifying actions, she was already an imposing and physically intimidating woman, standing 6 feet tall and weighing over 200 pounds. It was alleged that she was responsible for the passing of her husbands, younglings, numerous suitors, boyfriends, and even her own daughters, Myrtle and Lucy. Belle's motive was pretty simple: greed. She gained income by stealing life insurance and assets from her victims. Reports suggest her victim count exceeds 20, with some claiming it could be over 100. Inconsistencies in her post-mortem examination, such as the reported height being 2 inches shorter than Belle's 6 feet, contributed to her becoming a figure in American criminal folklore, often compared to a female Bluebeard, because people will make things up and just run with it sometimes. Number 7. Grisela Blanco. Born in 1943, Grisela Blanco, known by her aliases of La Madrina or the Black Widow, emerged as a frightening figure in the criminal underworld. Hailing from Colombia, she etched her name in history as one of the most ruthless and feared queenpins ever known. Blanco's notoriety reached its peak as a key player in the notorious Medellin cartel, a criminal empire synonymous with violence and illicit trade. What sets Blanco apart is her unexpected role as a mentor to none other than Pablo Escobar. However, as fate would have it, their relationship eventually soured, paving the way for a rivalry that would echo through criminal history. Blanco's criminal empire revolved around the transportation of a certain illegal powdery substance from the fields of Colombia to the streets of the United States. This calculated operation, coupled with her alleged involvement in up to 200 people being ushered to the pearly gates, showcased Blanco's audacity and cunning in a male-dominated realm. Her ability to not only navigate but dominate such a perilous environment proved her prowess as a criminal mastermind. Following a stint behind bars, Blanco's life met a chilling end on September 3rd, 2012, when she was wiped out in a hail of lead, leaving a void in the criminal landscape she once ruled. I'm all for girl power, but let's just put that energy somewhere else, shall we? Cool. Number 6. Christiana Edmonds. Christiana Edmonds, also known as the Chocolate Cream Killer, was an English woman with a really disturbing hobby. She would purchase chocolates, lace them with strychnine, a powerful and toxic chemical, and then return them to the shop. Unexpecting customers who bought those chocolates would naturally fall ill. In 1871, a tragic incident occurred when a young person passed away after consuming one of the poisoned chocolates. Now, following this, Edmonds escalated her campaign by sending parcels of her dangerous chocolates to notable individuals. As the police began linking the fatal and damaging outcomes to the chocolates, Edmonds attempted to deflect suspicion by sending parcels to herself in order to mislead the police. How intelligent. Once she was caught, Edmonds was initially sentenced to death, but her punishment was later changed to life imprisonment due to her mental illness. Number 5. Mary I of England. Born on February 18, 1516, Mary I held the throne as Queen of England and Ireland from July 1553 until her passing. As the only surviving child of the marriage between Henry VIII and his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, Mary I's reign is notable for her brutal persecution of Protestants, earning her infamous moniker Bloody Mary. Her attempt to forcefully return England to Catholicism resulted in the forced passing of numerous prominent Protestants, contributing to a climate of fear and leading around 800 Protestants to flee the country, unable to return until her passing. During her reign, Bloody Mary implemented the heresy laws, which resulted in the burning of over 300 Protestants accused of heresy. Despite the widespread violence, Mary I was never prosecuted for her actions. However, after her passing on November 17, 1558, the winds of change swept through England, ushering away from her staunch Catholic policies. The efforts to re-establish Catholicism were ultimately reversed, marking a turning point in the religious landscape of England. Mary I's reign, entwined with religious strife and political turmoil, remains a complex chapter in history where power, ideology, and the consequences of persecution shape the course of a nation. Number 4. Wu Zetian. Between 665 and 690, Wu Zetian controlled China as empress through her husband, and later as empress dowager through her sons. However, in 690, she achieved a historic milestone by becoming empress, marking her as China's first and only official recognized female ruler. Wu Zetian maintained her authoritarian position from 690 until her passing in 705. Now, despite the significant achievements in expanding China's territory and establishing it as a powerful empire, her reign was unfortunately also marked by violence and bloodshed. Wu Zetian's rise to power was marked by a series of manipulative and ruthless tactics. She orchestrated the downfall of her political rivals, resorting to schemes such as false accusations, purges, anything to eliminate potential threats. While her success in building a powerful empire is acknowledged, she has faced enduring criticism for the ruthless tactics employed to do so. Number 3. Maryanne Cotton. Maryanne Cotton, who lived in the 1800s, left behind a criminal tale that's not all neatly documented. Back then, record keeping wasn't the greatest, so we're left with a bit of a puzzle when it comes to the exact details of her evil actions. But it's estimated that Cotton might have offed around 21 people. 3 of them were unlucky husbands, and a whopping 11 were her very own family. She had this not-so-friendly habit of using arsenic to bring their lives to an end, and then cashing in on their life insurance policies. The party came to a screeching halt, however, when she attempted this method on her stepson, Charles Edward Cotton, leading to her capture and the grand finale, a date with the executioner. Now, here's where it gets interesting. They gave her a short rope instead of the customary long one. This meant that instead of physics causing her neck to snap, she instead suffered a long, slow, agonizing suffocation. Number 2, Mary Piercy. Mary Piercy, born in 1866, lived in Kentish Town, North London, with her lover, Charles Creighton. Feeling unsatisfied with life, at the age of 24, Mary sought more, leading her to become romantically involved with a man named Frank Hogg. However, it seems that Frank was also already spoken for, being already married to his pregnant wife, Phoebe. The dark events unfolded on October 24, 1890, when a policeman discovered the almost severed body of a woman in Crossfield Road, Hampstead, along with a blood-stained pram. Mary's association with the crime drew attention when she displayed hysterical behavior at the mortuary while viewing the body of the deceased woman, later identified as Phoebe Hanelo, Frank Hogg's wife. The next day, the lifeless body of Hogg's daughter was found near Finchley Road, a mile away. This time, the cause was suffocation. As the police became more and more aware of the affair between Frank and Mary, they searched Mary's house and found broken furniture and bloodstains. Mary, seemingly unfazed, played the piano and sang loudly during the search. The police ended up uncovering an axe, 2 knives, bloodstained clothing, and love letters between the illicit couple. Mary's attempts to explain the stains as a result of taking out mice was met with understandable skepticism. The police gathered evidence from neighbors who had witnessed Mary wheeling a pram away from the house on the evening of October 24th and heard screams from her residence. The disturbing truth emerged during the trial at the Old Bailey in December 1890. Mary's defense claimed insanity, but it proved unsuccessful, resulting in her sentencing to be sent to hell. On December 23rd, 1890, at Newgate Prison, Mary Piercy faced execution by hanging, orchestrated by James Barry, just over a decade after her father, Thomas Wheeler, met a similar fate for a similar crime. I guess it kind of runs in the family. Number 1, Delphine Lori. Delphine Lori was a prominent New Orleans socialite who lived during the early 19th century. She's infamously remembered for her role in one of the city's most gruesome and horrifying scandals. Born Mary Delphine McCarty in 1787, Lori married 3 times and became a central figure in New Orleans high society. However, her reputation took a pretty dark turn when her mistreatment of people that she kept forcibly endured came to light. Reports of extreme cruelty and sadistic practices circulated, revealing the disturbing treatment of servants within the Lori mansion. In 1834, a fire at the mansion exposed a hidden chamber where individuals were discovered in appalling conditions, subjected to unimaginable horrors. The shocking revelation sparked public outrage, and Delphine Lori fled the city, leaving behind a legacy of cruelty that continues to haunt the historical narrative of New Orleans.
One night, very late at night, Ed and Lorraine Warren were contacted by the Snedeker family, who had just moved into a house on Meriden Avenue in Southington. Specifically, the mother of the family unit and a niece who came to stay with the family were on the phone. And what they found and bought, they were like, oh yeah, we had this new home. It's big and welcoming. Turns out it was a former funeral home. And the morticians at that funeral home were involved in naughty things with the dead. The sons of this new family, they were the first to start talking about the things they had seen and experienced. They were terrified. And at first the parents were like, come on guys. But these boys were so scared they were sleeping on the floor in the living room. The women who called the Warrens were terrified. They were hiding in a small bedroom in the back of the house, and the covers on the bed around them were levitating, like there was a fan blowing them around. And Lorraine said that while they were on the phone, even more bizarre events started happening. The mother had rosary beads in her hand, and while she spoke, the beads were actually being pulled apart and falling to the floor. A blessing of the house seemed to do nothing to calm things down. The church eventually sent an exorcist, which seemed to do the trick, but not before one last hurrah from whatever was doing all this chaos. So there was this huge tree in front of the house, right? And half of the tree, with no wind, broke off and fell on the property. Yeah, I'd be hightailing it out of there after that. In the chilling case of the Perron family, their seemingly serene farmhouse in Rhode Island concealed a dark and malevolent secret. Soon after moving in, strange occurrences were unraveling, initially dismissed as minor inconveniences. Brooms moved on their own. The young daughters were seeing apparitions. Carolyn Perron, determined to uncover the truth, delved into the history of the house and discovered a lineage plagued by mysterious and tragic deaths spanning 8 generations. The most ominous presence of that was of Bathsheba Sherman. Bathsheba's malevolent intentions became evident as the family's life spiraled into a nightmare. One harrowing incident involved Carolyn experiencing an inexplicable puncture wound on her calf, resembling a large sewing impalement. This unsettling occurrence was just one of many tormenting episodes endured by the Perron family over their decade-long residency in the house, known as the Old Arnold Estate. Now the Warrens were summoned to help because who else? And they identified a mysterious box, which they believed acted as a conduit for Bathsheba's demonic energy to afflict the household. So they performed their blessings, they removed the malevolent object, and lived to tell the tale. Patty Donovan's innocent curiosity led her down a treacherous path when she engaged with a Ouija board, believing she'd found a friend through the board. And as she grew emotionally dependent on this entity, the malevolent spirit, once her confidant, turned into a demonic force, wreaking havoc on her entire family. It targeted their vehicles, it disassembled engines, it punctured tires. Things escalated. We're talking crazy vandalism around the home, inexplicable damage to the property, to the point of levitating furniture, rocks raining down in the house. Father Ted Donovan's desperation led him to seek help from Ed and Lorraine Warren. So upon their arrival, they knew right away there was some malevolence, and they found out about the Ouija board. So they realized, okay, this is bad, and they initiated the process for an exorcism, which sadly took a month to be granted. So during that time, the family endured more torment and destruction at the hands of the entities. Finally, exorcism takes place, liberating the family from their demonic ordeal. But they're left with a substantial financial burden because, well, extensive damage. The Scottish Bean Clan. It might sound like a kind of yummy dish, but this isn't for recipes. We're not cooking here. They were a 45-member clan in Scotland in the 16th century that killed and feasted on over 1,000 people during, just 25 years. According to legend, Bean and his clan members were eventually caught by a search party sent by King James VI and lost their lives for their heinous crimes. Alexander Bean was born in East Lothian during the 16th century, where he eventually met a vicious woman named Black Agnes Douglas, who shared his inclinations, and she was accused of being a witch. So after some robbing and the consumption of just one of their victims, the couple ended up at a coastal cave in Benay Head between Girvan and Ballantrae. I tried. The cave was about 200 yards deep and the entrance was blocked by water during high tide. So this was a great hiding spot for 25 years. They produced 6 daughters, 8 sons, 14 granddaughters, and 18 grandsons. And yeah, the grandchildren were the products of keeping it in the family, if you get what I mean. So this clan thrived by laying very careful ambushes at night to rob and end individuals or small groups, bringing the bodies back to their cave where then, well, dinner time! They pickled the leftovers in barrels and discarded what they didn't need. Sometimes that would wash up on nearby beaches. This strategy was used to help conceal their crimes and lead villagers to believe that it was animals that were attacking these travelers. Look, the body parts and disappearances did not go completely unnoticed by the locals, but the clan stayed in their cave by day, took their victims at night, so they weren't exactly out and about. They were eventually captured alive, and they met their end without trial, because folks were like, yeah, that's subhuman, you don't need a trial, your life is over. Sonny and his fellow men had their fun parts cut off and thrown into the fire. They lost their hands and feet, and then game over. Now the woman, tied to stakes, burned alive. Makes sense for the time period. And finally for today, the Bender family. We can't talk about their very fun nickname, but you know what I'm talking about. So this was a family of mass killers. They lived and operated in Labette County in Kansas, US, back in 1871 to 1872. So we've got John, his wife Elvira, their son John Jr., and daughter Kate. And we don't know how many people specifically they killed, but if we're estimating, at least a dozen travelers. What do you mean by travelers? Well, they would visit the family's bed and breakfast, and then they'd be hypnotized to stay for dinner, given a seat of honor at the table, which was positioned over a trapdoor into the cellar. So they'd be distracted, and then somebody bops you in the head, you fall through the trapdoor, game over. And that's all for today, folks. I've been Alexa. See ya!